and welcome to Outlaw Gamer Radio, the official podcast of OutlawGamers.com. This is the show where we live to play and play to live. I'm Brent Adams, joined by a man whose name will not be mentioned, even though he's the sole reason anyone shows up week after week. And I want to assure you that he's going to remain involved with this show right up until the moment he isn't, and then we'll pretend we never even knew his name was Mr. Lauren Baumgarten. Lauren!
I like that one because it made me think. It took me, I know what the show notes are. We were just talking about this, and I still was sitting there thinking, what the hell is he talking about?
It finally sneaks up on you there towards the end.
It does, and I can't wait to talk about it. We're going to talk about what you're alluding to in the Clubhouse section. But
if it makes you feel any better, you're not the most famous or most talented person this phenomenon has happened to in recent memory.
That's a true story. I'm excited to talk about it. But greetings, my friend. Welcome to episode 11 of Outlaw Gamer Radio.
Oh, yeah, the big 1-1. That's actually not all that huge.
It's really
milestone.
It's not that
big.
But,
you know, I figure every day above ground is worthwhile, and that means every episode under our belt falls into that same category, unless you're one of the poor masses who actually listens to this show, in which case I do apologize. But anyway,
I'm excited, Brent. I'm excited to talk this week. I surprised you last week with what I was playing, and I am wondering if you are surprised this week by what I am playing.
I am. I am a bit surprised.
I thought you would be. I thought you would be.
That's we got a whole show to do between now and then. So why don't we go ahead and get started?
Oh, you want to talk about games? Okay,
that's right. Let's kick things off. We're going to head into the garage, get to some of the nuts and bolts of the gaming news and trailers of the week. I'm going to be honest with you, maybe not the smoothest segue that's ever been. If Daniel Kaiser were here, he would probably school me on this. He could probably come up with something better. But anyway, the point is this. God of War 3 Remastered coming to PlayStation 4 on July 14th. There's a very nice retrospective article over on the official U.S. PlayStation blog written by your friend and mine, Corey Barlog, who, of course, was the creative director on my favorite game in the series, which was God of War 2. He was the art director on the first game and worked as creative director for, 8 months or so of God of War 3. So it's not like he doesn't have a toe in that water prior to leaving Sony Santa Monica to go off and do other things. He's actually back at Sony Santa Monica these days as creative director of the studio overall, and I'm sure working on various cool things over there. But anyway, the point is this. God of War 3 Remastered for the PlayStation 4, going to be out July 14th. I said all this before, but the real question here is, too little too late, Lauren? Does anyone care at this point? Is it 2015 and remasters are last year's news? Is God of War 3 the correct game in this franchise to remaster and re-release on the PlayStation 4? What say you?
Well, actually, I want to know what you think first. Because
I wish we had like 4 people on this so I could go McLaughlin group on it. I could like stare at one person and be talking to them and then ask another person who I'm not even looking at a question. That would be so rad, dude.
You're a bigger fan of the series than I am.
Obviously.
But and so I'm curious to know if this seems valuable to you.
No. In a word, no.
Why not? I'm just curious. Like, why, if being such a big fan of this series, and you liked God of War 3, did you not?
It was okay. I mean, it's not my favorite game in the series, though. I mean, God of War 2, God of War 1, God of War 3 is how they rank for me personally. I would have been, in similar manner to you, as we talk about Uncharted 4, and almost every time we talk about Uncharted 4, you talk about, what I'd really like to have is an Uncharted 1 through 3 remastered on the PlayStation 4.
And have them redo half of Uncharted 3, but that's neither here nor there.
Yes, well, but tweak, all the things that were fixed in Uncharted 2, go back and fix those in Uncharted 1. Bring in those multiple enemy types so that you don't have that.
Oh my God!
You don't have that.
I wasn't even thinking.
Just emptying
deep.
multiple magazines of ammo into a guy wearing a wife beater. But anyway, my point is this: if they had announced that they were going back and redoing the first 2 games, or even 1 through 3 in this big, massive HD remake for the PlayStation 4 that was coming out this summer, I would be tossing my cookies. I mean, I would be losing my mind with excitement over that. But I have to say that since God of War 3 is not my favorite game from the series, I played it the one time, and I really have never cared to go back and revisit it, as opposed to the other 2 games, which I have played through multiple times over the years. I just can't find it within myself to get that excited about it.
Fair enough. I mean, I guess I suppose that's the equivalent of if they were remastering and re-releasing just Uncharted 3.
Exactly.
I honestly wouldn't care. It's by far my least favorite of the 3 games. And Uncharted goes the same way for me. It's Uncharted 2,
1, and 3.
Uncharted 1, 3, and that's exactly right. And so if it was just Uncharted 3, I would have no interest really at all in spending the money for it. But however, if they do, and again, I wasn't even thinking about what you're describing, where they're like kind of beefing up the AI. I was just thinking, like, go back and pretty up the textures a little bit. Right. I would absolutely buy the set, and I agree. I would be as excited. Now, I think there's a good chance that we may see that still with Uncharted, especially with the game having been pushed back.
God of War, I remain the fact that they're doing this,
right? I think it's makes it doubtful that they would do the whole collection. I agree. So, well, there you go. So I was curious. I mean, I put this on here for you because I really thought this was something you might be excited about. But my guess is,
I wish I was.
My guess is you're going to be very excited about the next item.
You, me, and a whole lot of other people, which of course is the news that Star Wars Battlefront, the new Star Wars Battlefront, as developed by EA DICE, which we got teased at E3. What was that? I can't remember how many years ago that was now.
It must have been 2 at this point, right? Yeah.
2 years ago at E3. And now it's right around the corner. We're going to get our first peek at Star Wars Battlefront, which is going to be part of the Star Wars Celebration taking place in April, which is right around the corner, April 16th through the 19th. I mean, it's like 3 weeks away. So
that's right.
The point is that I imagine we're going to be getting some details, some gameplay videos, some firsthand impressions very, very soon at whatever it is that EA DICE has been cooking up in the way of Star Wars Battlefront. I am officially losing my mind over this one. I am very, very excited about this. I'm a huge fan of Star Wars Battlefront. It was a phenomenal, phenomenal experience back in the PlayStation 2 era. I had no shortage of enjoyment playing that game on the couch, co-op with my friends. And frankly, I think that I'm not expecting this new game to be, I'm not expecting it to be like exactly what the old game was. I think that it's going to be a lot closer to, say, a Battlefield game than the old Battlefront games. But I don't have a problem with that. I actually find that to be a pretty exciting prospect, provided that it actually works and that they don't have some of the infamous launch trouble that has seemed to plague the Battlefield franchise a couple of times now.
Although apparently, as a matter of fact, I almost put this on here as a story, Brent, because to me it's such a big deal. Apparently Hardline had a stellar launch day, with the exception of I think there was a DDoS attack on the Xbox version, but there's nothing they could do about that. But other than that, I think they had a really smooth launch this time.
Is that partly because nobody gives a fuck about that game and they're not playing it?
It could be because they only sold 50,000 copies.
I'm the only person apparently who thinks that Hardline looks cool, but that's great news. And in all sincerity, congratulations to EA for pulling that off with those ridiculously small numbers. But my point is,
yes. So
great for you, and I hope that you can repeat that success with Battlefront, which I imagine you're going to sell a few more copies of.
This is rapidly climbing my list of most anticipated games of the year, with Uncharted being pushed back into 2016, with Batman being delayed again, and I have to assume it won't come out till 2016 at this point.
They're saying they're only pushing it back 2 weeks, but we all know the truth. This game ain't coming out till next.
That's right. No, Battlefront. I am very, very excited to see gameplay. What I'm hoping and what I'm assuming is going to be gameplay in just a few weeks. It's very, very exciting.
if this game is basically just if this game feels like basically just a skin on top of Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4 multiplayer, if you've got these enormous arenas that you're playing in where you're on foot, you're using vehicles and things like that, will that satisfy everything that you want this game to be?
I mean, I think it would. It depends. It depends if they implement everything around it if they implement everything around it in a very believable Star Wars first 3 movie Star Wars universe way.
Yeah.
I think that would make for a very, very enjoyable game. It doesn't mean that's all I want. And I'm hoping that they do more than just skin Battlefield.
Really good squad based mechanics also is something that I want pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think
class based mechanics. You know, like I really want a game that encourages teamwork by virtue of how their class system is set up.
Yeah, so I agree with you, and I think that would be fantastic. And I'm I'm not really sure what to expect, to be honest with you, Brent. I'm not really sure if they're going to simply skin Battlefield, which, I mean, frankly, if you had pitched me the idea of Hardline, before I ever saw anything of it and said Battlefield but cops and robbers, I would have thought to myself, wow, that sounds pretty goddamn cool. I love Battlefield. And then, but the reality is when I saw it, I watched it and I went, this is just Battlefield skinned with cops and robbers, and it made it uninteresting to me.
Right.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to expect. I'm sort of being cautiously optimistic, and I'm just waiting to see what we get in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'm curious about that as well. I'm curious to see if I'm curious to see if they end up having any kind of like heroes class, something I guess like maybe like a Juggernaut kind of mechanic that would let you play as, say, Han Solo or Darth Vader or something like that.
You think they'll let you play as a Wookiee?
Well, I mean, they did in the other game, so I would assume so.
Yeah.
Did you play either of the old Battlefront games on console?
Not on console.
PC?
I played on PC long after, I think it was Battlefront 2 that I played, and I played it long after the game was released, like a few years. I mean, no, it was a single player experience basically.
Right, because nobody really playing at that point.
And I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I really dug those games as well, and I'm hoping that, I guess that I'm hoping for a bit more than just Battlefield skin, but I really would like to see them. I'd really like to see them, I guess, just give us a different perspective on the Star Wars universe through things, just like as an example, imagine a combination of close quarters combat, fighting in the streets kind of stuff, but in Coruscant as opposed to Fallujah, that the scale of action like we saw in some of the Battlefield games, and certainly the destructibility of the environments could be a really interesting thing. But I'm just imagining, that kind of stuff. I'm imagining, a level that's really just like a corridor QC or CQB shootout level that takes place like in Cloud City or something, where it's just
that's what I was just
corridors
thinking.
And the map and trying to take control points and slowly kind of overwhelm your opponent, that kind of thing.
Well, I was just thinking, what if they actually did, so again, more than just Battlefield, what if they actually did just real locations from, let's say, Empire, so we're on Hoth. You actually get to drive an AT-AT. You might, maybe get to fly a snowspeeder. Yeah. You actually, Cloud City would be a great CQB area. Dagobah would be a really interesting place, I think, to fight. And maybe, of course, like Tatooine. There's a lot that, or in a ship, for example, is something.
Yeah, I was thinking, like stuff
on a Star
happening.
Destroyer.
Well, think about the opening to Episode 4 and the attack on Tantive 4. Basically, you got to like invade the ship. That'd be like an attack and defend kind of mechanic.
What
where
if you were on Alderaan
Empire,
and you were running out of time before the Death Star destroyed Alderaan?
There's all kinds of cool sort of endpoints that I could see them going with. But in terms of gameplay mechanics, I don't have any great ideas for what they might do different. I don't know that they necessarily need to do anything all that different from what they've already done in the Battlefield franchise.
Well, certainly vehicles and, things like I said, like AT-ATs or, the ability to ride a Tauntaun. I'm not sure what that does for you tactically, but
it makes you small and difficult to shoot.
Or a Bantha, maybe?
Or at least, from an AT-AT perspective.
Or Luke's hovercraft. I don't know, but I'm super, I guess we'll know a lot more in 3 weeks. I'm super, super pumped to see it. So
Death Star trench run, baby.
Let's move on to item 3 here in the Garage Brand, because this is also kind of interesting. This is the article's from Polygon, but it's about an interview. Actually, I initially found the article on IGN. IGN cited Polygon, and Polygon is, of course, citing another source, which is Jeff Keighley did a one-off podcast in which he interviewed Gabe Newell. It was a podcast he did called Game Slice, and he interviewed Gabe Newell, and Gabe commented on sort of Valve's game development plans and the possibility of more Half-Life and sort of where the studio is in its life cycle, and particularly, he talked about a lot of things, but the part that the press has sort of clung on to is what he said about about Valve as a game making studio,
right?
Which is essentially, you're not getting Half-Life 3, really, is essentially what he said. That's not what he said. What he said was basically that they have migrated from a game development studio to a distribution service provider, and now are working heavily in the hardware space, both with the Steam Boxes initiative, the controller, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
As well as
Steam VR.
Steam VR is exactly right. And so he said that they are not opposed to working on, and I'm paraphrasing here, older IPs like Half-Life, for example, but that they would work on them when it was appropriate. And
he kind of made it sound like we would work on those IPs if there was something that we could get out of it as far as like advancing our current sort of business model.
Right,
or
essentially they're not a game developer anymore. They're not primarily, not first and foremost.
Yeah.
And so, for example, they revisited Portal 2 for the VR initiative because it made sense with what they were working on.
Right.
But they were much bigger than just a development studio, and my sort of inference was that game development was really very low on their list of things to do.
Yeah. They would develop games as a way of sort of showing off new technologies,
or showing them off,
developing.
or using them in the process of researching new technologies,
right?
That sort of thing. And so, I don't know, Brent. I mean, I feel like I felt like after reading that and this is 100% my opinion. And there's you can go listen to the podcast with Jeff Keighley. You can read the articles. In nowhere does he say this, but I got the feeling that it all but sort of sounded the death knell for Half-Life 3. Did you get that sense?
No, honestly. Actually, what he actually says about it is that he'd be happy if Valve worked on it, but it would basically come down to a bunch of people within the studio getting together and saying, "Okay, we got to do this game. We are dying to do it. Here's some ideas that we want to do," and blah 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 blah.
And then proving the value of it, though. Like the value to the business beyond just money, I think.
But in no way did he say, "Look, Half-Life 3 is just not a priority for us." He's basically, what I took his meaning to be was, if we're going to do Half-Life 3, we need to do it in a way that satisfies what our current goals are, and our current goals are broader in scope than just make Half-Life 3 a really good video game and then sell it. So I think that maybe it's just a glasses half full kind of way of looking at it. There's a glass there that's got some water in it, and you can kind of look at it whatever way you like. But I personally did not take his meaning to be the ship has sailed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very glasses half full kind of guy in general. I just got the impression from his words that it wasn't a priority right now, and
I think that's fair to say.
And you know, and I mean, he recognizes the value that people place on things that they care about, that they grew up with, that are meaningful to them, and you know, he alludes to an author that he loves that has actually died since the interview, but
Terry Pratchett.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, he talks about how like, yeah, it would bum me out to know I would never get another Terry Pratchett book, and so he recognizes that. Well, and yes, unfortunately, it turns
grab
out
a fork
that he
and
won't.
dig into a big plate of sad then, because
Yeah, right. But I don't know. It was just a sense I got that this is just really far down on the list right now. Not that it would never see the light of day, but that just said it was really far down on the list.
Yeah. I think that I think that's it's reasonable for you to feel that way, but at the same time, I guess I can't blame Valve for having that attitude. I guess I think that they've proven over the last decade or so that they are capable of a lot more than just being a game developer, and frankly, Valve is a powerful force within the game industry. Certainly, they're a huge driving force in the PC industry. Probably the biggest single company that's moving and shaking things there. And I think that all things being equal, Valve concentrating on innovating and pushing the industry in the direction that they would like to see it go in is probably more important than us getting Half-Life 3. I guess I kind of feel like if I'm giving up Half-Life 3 so that Valve, you know, kicks VR into high gear and launches that salvo and gets everybody, you know, jumping into it, then I can't really fault them for it. Or, you know, that's my general kind of feeling about it, I guess.
Yeah, nor do I. I mean, I understood completely sort of where Gabe was coming from. Yeah. And frankly, I appreciate the candor.
I agree. Yeah. And that's, you know, that has worked both for and against Valve. As you know, as you and I were kind of talking about recently, just Valve's whole sort of approach to PR and the kind of the way that they just sort of will say no to certain things. That can work for and against them, but I do appreciate
like
the candor.
Refunds, you mean?
Well, yeah, refunds, customer support in general. I think, you know, really, if there was one thing that you were going to lay at their feet and say that they really, really need to improve, I think it's their customer support in general.
Well, and we didn't talk about this on the show, but there was an article recently interviewing one of the senior VPs or something like that, and they were talking
about addressing that very thing.
Right, they admit that their customer service really needs some attention.
Basically, they need to go and they need to hire not the highest guy, but let's say one of his underlings over at Amazon who is in charge of customer satisfaction. They need to hire that person to come in and say, "Here's how you do it right."
That's right. I don't disagree with that.
All right, so let's move on. This is going to be the last story in the garage, and it's some Nintendo news, which is not something that you see a lot of on this show.
Right. I'm trying to mix it up a little bit, bring in some Nintendo love.
Well, there's a lot of Nintendo news to kind of talk about in the sense that very recently, Nintendo did something that I think many of us never imagined would actually happen, and that is Nintendo has ventured into mobile gaming waters. They have partnered with a company called DNA, who's already an established developer for freemium and free-to-play games on mobile platforms, and they are going to start working with DNA to not only start creating games that will utilize Nintendo characters and properties, but also, and this is the thing that I think is pretty interesting about this, they're going to be jointly developing a new membership service to encompass 3DS, Wii U, and presumably whatever these new games are. On top of that, as part of the announcement, the joint announcement between Nintendo and DNA that this was happening, and what some of the particulars were, the CEO of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata, he wanted to, I suppose, put everybody's mind at rest that Nintendo is not jumping ship and just hopping into the mobile game space, but they're staying committed to dedicated hardware, they're remaining committed to a dedicated hardware business model. And he announced that they have a next generation hardware concept in development called NX as a code name NX. That is
Nintendo Extreme.
Who can say? But that is in development, and Nintendo will be presumably talking more about that in the future sometime. So a lot of stuff to kind of talk about within the context of this story. I suppose chronologically, let's just start with one day you wake up and Nintendo says, "Hey, guess what? We're going to basically do exactly what Daniel Kaiser begged us to do all those years on Epic Battle Cry. We're going to start releasing games on mobile platforms that utilize our characters. We partnered with this company called DNA to do it." What do you think about that, Lauren?
Insofar as I don't care about Nintendo properties, I think that I think it's great for fans of Nintendo. I mean, I think it's been a long time coming. I think that I'm assuming they're going to give Daniel a percentage. I haven't talked to Daniel about it, but
I think they actually set up a trust fund for hair products
because
is what they.
I think Iwata was clearly did this because of Daniel's musings, but no, I mean, I think it's fantastic. Like I said, I think it's a long time coming. I think the property, I think several of Nintendo's biggest properties. They're meant to be on mobile platforms. They're on mobile platforms already. They're just on Nintendo's mobile platforms, right?
Yeah.
And so they work very, very well. And so, I would imagine that they've been cautious about this historically because if it's a fine balance between what is proprietary and what isn't, right? So. How much do you put out, for example, on smartphones? And if you're putting out this really super compelling products, I don't know. What do Nintendo DS games go for? 3DS games or whatever? They're probably $30, I'm guessing.
30, 40, yeah.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, you can't be putting out games on a regular basis on that price point on a smartphone.
No.
Even if even as smartphones are getting bigger and the iPhone 6 is 6 inches and the Nexus 6 and the Galaxy Note 4 and all that stuff, you're still not going to be charging $30, $40 for these games, right? So, it's a fine line they walk between if they put out a really compelling product on smartphones, does it make people sort of not want to buy the next iteration of the 3DS, right? Because now the property is available on the smartphone.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be two different kinds of gaming. I mean, even as casual as some of Nintendo's games are, they are much more of a core experience. I'm talking about something on the 3DS.
So do you think like stuff on the smartphone is going to be like more like, say, Candy Crush, but skinned with the Nintendo characters? Then it will be an actual Mario game or an actual Zelda game?
Yeah, probably. I think it's very likely that initially it will probably be familiar mobile game tropes.
Angry Birds, but with Mario, or
revisited with Nintendo properties. I think that's probably likely. Although, given how brilliant some of Nintendo's designers are with game design and mechanics, I don't want to sell them short and say that I don't think that Nintendo can't come up with some really fascinating and original ideas for gameplay. I just imagine that the reason if they were planning to do wholly original things, I don't know that they'd necessarily need to partner with a developer that's already so entrenched and identified with mobile gaming as DNA is. And honestly, that's kind of that's maybe a sticking point because there's a lot of people that are not so fond of DNA and their games and the way they kind of do the freemium business model. So I think some people are going to find a point of contention over that alone. The other part of the equation is not just the games part, but the new membership service. And as I've said many times, Nintendo has an incredible problem understanding and utilizing online services. They suck. Nintendo's online services suck. They are a decade or more behind everybody else. And when you see the ease with which you can obtain digital content and enjoy it across multiple platforms through companies like Amazon, Apple, Sony, Microsoft, whatever, there is no excuse for Nintendo to suck as much as they do. And they suck enormously, in case that wasn't clear. And there's no excuse for them to in this day and age. So I have to say that the thing I'm most excited about is the idea that somebody who actually understands online services is maybe going to be working with Nintendo to do something worthwhile and get rid of the mess of shit that has been Nintendo online services up to this point.
Yeah, certainly that is an interesting aspect. You know, what I thought was equally as interesting was this sort of casual nature in which they, I mean, not that we wouldn't think that they were working on a hardware platform, because I guess we would assume that they were, but it just seems weird that this sort of casual nature in which they say, oh yeah, by the way, we are working on another hardware platform called NX.
I think it's just to qualm any fears that anybody had that Nintendo was throwing in the towel. That they were saying, you know, the Wii was a really big thing. 3DS is still doing great for us. Wii U, not so much. It's starting to look like we don't have any original ideas, or at least any original ideas that people are interested in anymore. So, hey, let's give up and just start doing games on iPhone and Android. I think,
well, to be clear, they haven't said that the NX is a home console platform. It could be a mobile piece of hardware. It could be,
but they do say pretty explicitly that it's a dedicated game console. So yeah, I mean, it could potentially, it could in theory be a new handheld.
It could be a VR. They say a dedicated game platform with a brand new concept. Yeah. So maybe they're working on VR. Maybe they're working on Nintendo
but it could
VR.
It could also just be marketing speak for we're doing another console. You know,
it could be. You're right. We have no idea.
We don't. But
which is what I think is weird. They sort of throw it out there and don't.
But I think it's just there so that people don't get afraid that Nintendo's still not going to be Nintendo. I think that's what they're trying to say. They're trying to say, look, everything that we've been doing as a company, we're going to keep doing. We're also doing this, though. And we're going to be even better because we're going to have all our stuff. Plus, you're going to have Mario puzzle games and stuff on your phone. And we're going to have this better unified membership service that's actually going to work in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, well, we'll see if it gives them the much needed infusion that I feel that they've needed since the sort of the lackluster performance of the Wii U.
An infusion of not suck. Welcome to the Clubhouse, everybody. Kick up your feet, pull up a chair, grab a frothy beverage of your choice, not necessarily in that order. But the point is we're going to sit down and talk about some interesting developments within the game industry over the last week or so. But before we do that, we're going to talk about some interesting developments in a little thing I like to call remembering to include a weekly poll. Congratulations, Brent. Lauren, poll results, please.
All right. Brent's poll this week was, how many of you are glad that I actually remembered to put a poll in? He gave you 4 choices.
You don't know how tempted I was.
The poll this week, of course, last week we talked about toxic behavior in forums and on the internet and that sort of thing. And so Brent posed the question, which of these strategies do you think is effective at curbing toxic behavior? And he gave you 4 choices to choose from. Coming in last place with just 2% of the vote is limiting community size. Coming in third place with 19% of the vote is banning problem members. And then coming in second place, close to first place, but not quite, 37% of the vote, leadership within the community, and not an overwhelming, but 42% of the vote. The choice was all of them, a combination of leadership within the community, limiting community size, and banning problem members. Now, not as many people voted this week, Brent. I don't know if that's because they're not used to there being a poll, or if it's because we actually banned half of the people because we didn't like what they were voting. But
well, there's that, of course.
No, I'm just kidding. It's an interesting topic for sure, and we're very fortunate to have such a great community. We did talk quite a bit about it last week, and so at the risk of beating a dead horse, I think we will move on and talk about the very interesting topic this week that came to us from Rowan. Thank you very much, or at least that's how it got to me.
Among others.
Brent, why don't you set this up for us and tell us what we're talking about?
Well, sure. What we're talking about, what she's talking about, and what many of you are talking about is the news that Hideo Kojima is leaving Konami.
And been deleted from everything associated with it.
Yes, and is no longer a part of the Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain video game, apparently. No, not really. In the absence of information, rumor and speculation will take hold, and that is exactly what we saw happen this past week as news stories began to come out saying, hey, something really weird is happening over at Konami's website. This is what it looked like last week, and you see Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, a Hideo Kojima game in large letters above the title, and then there's a new page that doesn't have the a Hideo Kojima game part, and the fact that you would go and look at the corporate lineup over at Konami and Hideo Kojima's name, some other prominent people at Kojima Productions no longer there, and people began to say, it certainly looks like Hideo Kojima is no longer at Konami. Is that what's going on? And I think in what can only be described as a massive PR clusterfuck, Konami and Kojima decided to say nothing, which is always a great idea. And basically it took days to kind of get the news that Kojima's leaving Konami after the Phantom Pain comes out later this year. He's remaining there, 100% committed, et cetera, until the game comes out. But then after that, it looks like they're parting ways, and that Konami is going to continue with the Metal Gear franchise, sans Kojima. That, I think, are the essential facts of the story right now. Lauren, would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, certainly those are the essential facts. The interesting, as you said, it's very odd how this is unfolded, obviously, and I agree, just a PR clusterfuck. They have said that they are going to continue making Metal Gear Solid games. Kojima has said that he wants to work on something else. Which I think is interesting. There are certainly, if you go, there's a thread, and we'll link to it on Outlaw Gamers that you can check out where a few of the folks were talking about it, and they were talking about their perspective on how this impacts the Metal Gear Solid franchise. They certainly, the folks that are talking about it know more about the Metal Gear Solid franchise than I do, and have played. I haven't played a lot of the portable games and that sort of thing, and. I think that I think there's some valid points in that thread. I'm very interested to see Kojima work on something else. I think is first and foremost what comes to my mind. It doesn't make me in the least bit worried about the Phantom Pain. They have made it clear that Kojima is a part of the Phantom Pain, and that he will continue to be a part of the game through till it's finished. I think their contract goes through December, according to one anonymous source on GameSpot or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about this particular game. I am honestly more interested in what Kojima works on next than the next Metal Gear Solid at this point.
I'm just the opposite in that regard. I'm infinitely more interested in seeing somebody else work on the Metal Gear franchise.
Oh, interesting.
Than Kojima at this point.
Do you think Kojima has of late been a hindrance to that franchise? Or are you just interested to see what someone else's take is?
Yeah, more of that. I mean, I don't think he's done anything wrong per se in the Metal Gear franchise. I really like the direction the Phantom Pain was going vis-a-vis being an open world stealth action game. That is very appealing to me. But what I have connected with in the Metal Gear games has always been the gameplay and the game mechanics and the richness of the gameplay experience over the actual storytelling and in many cases characters that that I was interacting with. I have never been as enamored of what he wanted to say as a storyteller as I was the gameplay opportunity his or the Metal Gear games afforded me. So I guess that as the Metal Gear series has gone on through all these various iterations, my interest in it has sort of been in spite of itself in a way. And I'm very, very interested in the idea of fresh blood coming in and saying, okay, we have some really great established gameplay mechanics and some ideas and things, and we've got this rich mythos that we can draw on. What kind of story would we want to tell? What kind of game would we want to create? And I think it'd be very interesting to see somebody come in and maybe put a fresh spin on that series. And I don't wish any ill on Kojima or whatever. I hope he goes and makes some game that he's really, really excited about and passionate about, and it kicks major ass and all that. But I'm just not. I just don't think that I connect as much with his sensibilities, so it makes me somewhat hesitant to get excited about whatever he might be doing next.
That's interesting, because I feel exactly the same way you do about my relationship to the game. But my thinking was that by moving on, he's sort of freeing himself from what I feel like maybe this franchise has sort of imposed on him from a storytelling standpoint.
Become a bit of an anchor, maybe.
Well, and maybe, I agree with you. I mean, I like his sensibilities. I've struggled with the story, mostly because it was so convoluted, and therefore the characters, mostly because it was so convoluted that I really struggled to understand really what was going on, and therefore have any kind of significant buy-in to the story. But I also didn't join the franchise until Metal Gear Solid 4, really. I mean, I've played some of the other games, but and so what I was thinking was that, but I like his aesthetic, I like his sensibilities, I like the little bits of humor in the game, I like the way that I like the pacing of the game very much. I love his attention to detail and certainly, and I like his sensibilities in terms of the grandiose nature of his game design. There's nothing else like it in video gaming. There's just nothing else like it, and I'm fine sitting in front of a 30-minute freaking cutscene in Metal Gear Solid for whatever reason. And
I don't know if I'd go that far.
So
up until then, I was pretty much with you.
Even without the buy into the story. So my thinking was that perhaps, two things. One, perhaps moving on to a different franchise or a different IP would give him the freedom to sort of explore different storytelling lines, and two, it would give me the freedom to sort of start over with whatever his new endeavor is, right? Whereas I came in halfway or more through during the last iterations of what he was creating, I could sort of begin the journey with him. And so I don't know. I'm just really, clearly he is in the designing elite in our industry, in the history of our industry in the last 20, 30, 40 years. And really,
I think so.
I can't think of any.
He's a true auteur.
I agree. I can't think of any. That's the exact word I was thinking of. I can't think of anybody else like him. And so I would like to see what he does with something that's not this franchise he's been working on for 25 years.
Yeah, it would certainly be interesting. It would be hopefully it won't be a George Lucas Red Tails, kind of like what's George Lucas finally going to do when he's no longer making Star Wars films? You're like, ooh, that wasn't so good.
Grand Canyon.
But I hope it's not that. But I do share. I don't know if enthusiasm is the right word, but certainly I have great curiosity for what he would go on to do, and I think that whatever it is, he'll certainly have a large base of fans following with him. Something I was just thinking about, it's kind of interesting, going back to the original Metal Gear, which I played on the Nintendo Entertainment System, as I think most people listening to this show probably did, and looking at how far he was trying to push the medium, the kinds of storytelling he was trying to do even then, and you looking back, you can almost feel how confined he was by the technology that existed then, and how his vision was just waiting for the consoles to kind of catch up with him. And when they finally got within reach of his artistic vision, I think with the original Metal Gear on the PlayStation, you saw, what a profound moment in gaming it was. I mean, that game for Daniel and Tony and I think for many other people of that generation, that game was it was a life-changing moment as far as being a gamer goes. I mean, I've told the story. I mean, I came this close to losing my job at the time over that game, because that game meant more to me than the job I had at the time. And I will always be appreciative to Kojima for giving me such a profound gaming experience and really opening my eyes to what the medium could be.
Yeah, it's been a powerful presence for, whatever it is, 20. I just looked it up. I think it was 1987. That is 25 years. I was just saying stuff, but or something more like that.
I was just making shit
throwing out numbers, but I knew it was something like that. It's actually more like 26 or 27 years. But that's,
man, we should so go into politics, because
yeah, man. And I agree with you. Honestly, I hadn't thought of it. My initial reaction is this guy's an auteur. I cannot wait to see what he does next. You know what I mean? And I hadn't really given thought to what you brought up, which is the idea of seeing what somebody else does with Metal Gear Solid. Although my inclination is that they will sort of just expand a little bit upon what's already there, right? I'd be surprised if we saw a dramatic reinterpretation of the series in Metal Gear Solid 6. But it will be interesting to see, for sure.
Agreed.
And it's always a big deal when somebody of this stature, leaves their company. You know what the first thing I thought of was, Brent, was actually Ken Levine leaving Irrational. Is kind of what this and actually closing the doors of Irrational. That's sort of that's what it made me think of.
It's interesting, and this is something that Rowan talked about in the forum thread about this over at outlawgamers.com. But she was talking about how there seems to be kind of a corporate climate within some of the Japanese, publishers / I guess developers, about just the way they, just the way that they kind of conduct things. But there's been a lot of this, kind of bleeding of top tier content from these publishers that have had long standing relationships with these major dev talents. People like Kenji Inafune over at Capcom. Square's lost people, and obviously now Konami and Kojima. It's just really, really fascinating to kind of watch all of this upheaval within the game industry. And I think in much the same way that other prominent developers have left big studios to kind of strike out on their own and to do things their own way, I'm really curious, not necessarily what Kojima does next, but how he does it next. Does he go the Mighty Number 9 route, as an example, and does he go to Kickstarter and say, okay, here's the game I've been trying to make for 20 years, but Konami would never really let me. This is the vision I have. Will you support me in making it happen? Does he just turn Kojima Productions into its own indie house, or like that? I'm really curious about that aspect of it too. From a business standpoint, what does he do now that we are in this really interesting time in the gaming industry where so much is possible?
Yes, I mean it's an interesting topic. Certainly he could do that. He, like you said, I mean, if anybody could, he could go to Kickstarter and raise whatever money he needed, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, he could be. Everybody's like, oh, there'll never be another Star Citizen. It's just this Virgins. It's totally unique, and nobody's ever gonna do that thing again. They're gonna end up raising $100 million by the time that game comes out. Nobody else could probably pull that off. Kojima probably could.
Yeah, you're right. He probably could. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he's gonna do, and where he's gonna find yet another actor with a crazy scratchy voice.
It's not like he's not looking for work. Come on. right, everybody, we're going to hit the road and talk about some of the games we got our hands on this past week. Lauren alluded earlier to the fact that we were going to get a big surprise when we got down to this section of the show.
I don't know about a big surprise, but a surprise nonetheless.
Okay, it might have been a big surprise, but you made it sound like it was a big surprise, which is obviously a very different thing. But anyway, why don't you tell us what you've been playing?
So I actually went out and bought The Order 1886.
Okay, now see, I'm not surprised that you're playing The Order 1886, but I am surprised you paid for it.
Well, it went on sale, so here was my thinking, Brent.
Oh, now it all makes sense.
Here was my thinking. So the game went on sale this weekend for $39.99 at I think it was Best Buy. And I was looking at it and I was thinking about it. My theory was, remembering that I was back in the United States and that I could actually buy a physical copy of it for a relatively reasonable price.
So it was more just sort of a novelty for you.
No. It was my thinking was, well, I can just turn around and sell it in 2 weeks for, even if it's $20.
Very true.
Which the game is going for like 30, 35 right now on eBay. So if I could sell it for even $20, I will have paid $20 for the game. And I'm willing to pay $20 to check it out.
Okay.
So I did, and I've started playing it. I think I'm in the 4th chapter, maybe the 5th out of 16. So 25 or so % of the way through. And it's an interesting game. This could go down as the year's most, I don't want to say disappointing, but the game
confusing.
No, the game that like. The most misspent potential, really. So the game. I'm not far enough in the game to really talk about it tremendously, but the game is beautiful. First of all, it's absolutely gorgeous.
That's apparent.
The aesthetic of the game is fantastic. The voice acting is fantastic. Everything you've heard. The gameplay is good. It's solid gameplay. There's a few things, like minor tweaks that could have been handled a lot better, like the running mechanic could use some help. There's this thing where I don't know why they did this, but these little design decisions, like they force you when you pick up a weapon, for example, to look at it. You rotate the left stick, and it rotates the gun to look at it, and they force you to do it. And every time that a situation arises, they give you the hint for it. But I can't turn off the hints because then I wouldn't know how to, for example, pick a lock the first time I come across it. I'm still too early in the game to turn off the hints. And
they really want you to understand that this is a good-looking game.
Well, and to be honest with you, there's tons of places in this game where they really do. Like, it feels like they're tailoring the action to trying to get you to understand how beautiful the game is, which is like you can feel that in the game, and it's a little annoying. But the biggest problem with the game, as I see it right now, so my feeling is, and we'll see when I'm done, but if the rest of the game were to be like the game is now, I would say that it's a worthy experience of $20 or whatever, $25. It's not as like horrible as everyone says so far. Although I can 100% see if you'd paid $60 for it, or if you were just having a bad day or a couple days, how you could get really pissed off at the game. And the fundamental issue with the game all comes down to pacing, Brent, really. I mean, it's not the third person shooter gameplay is pretty decent. The weapons are cool. They're just, it's insane how frequently they take away control from you. I mean, it's absolutely insane. They're trying to create this cinematic experience in the truest sense. The game is letterboxed, which I'm totally okay with. I think that's a very valid design choice. I liked it in The Evil Within. I don't mind it here. I don't have a problem with it. They're trying to create an experience that is moving more towards a movie experience, and I'm okay with that too. But in doing so, their solution to that problem, Uncharted did the same thing. Uncharted did the exact same thing. They wanted a very cinematic experience. And nobody had a problem with that. And I have no problem with that either. The problem comes in is that their solution to that is to try and create more cinematic looking scenes it seems like they feel the only way they can truly do that is to take control from you. So they literally take control from you there's frequently in the game, it's every 15 to 30 seconds. Like you'll walk for 15 or 30 seconds, and then they will take control for 30 to 45 seconds. And then you'll walk for 15 to 20 or 30 seconds, and then they'll take control for a minute. And
that seems annoying.
It's really odd. It's very odd. And what it does is, it's not even that they take control that I have a problem with, except insofar as how much that breaks up the feeling of moving forward through the game. It makes the pacing, instead of flowing,
like it's just constantly starting and stopping.
Yeah, instead of having a flowing melody, it's this staccato thing that's just super awkward and weird, and it just feels jerky and twitchy, and even to the point of I'm sure you, of course, you remember in the Uncharted games how you'd be watching a cutscene and the cutscenes into gameplay were seamless. To the point that even, throughout the game in Uncharted 2 and in Uncharted 3, after having played tons of hours of the game, it was still an astonishing effect. How all of a sudden it would just be like, oh, wait a minute, that's the end of the cutscene? Holy moly.
I'm playing.
Right. They do the same thing in this game, which I love, in that there's no HUD and it's a seamless transition, only there's that moment. There's that moment where you can see like, oh, it just released my character. Do you know what I mean? Like that twitch, that little twitch where you go, okay, so that's where the cinematic stopped, and now I have my character. So they were trying to do what Uncharted did, but they're not doing it successfully. It's not seamless in that way. So it's very odd, and so I will have more to talk about it. But it is a good game. It is not the horrible, monstrosity of a video game, but it is. There is this one aspect to it, how I could see if you were sort of not in the mood. There's the atmosphere draws me in so much that when I play it, I find I play it suddenly I'm playing for 90 minutes, and I don't want to stop when I turn it off. But I can see how if you weren't in the mood, or I mean, if it just hit you the wrong way, the constant wresting of control out of your hands, I could see how that could make somebody say this game is a 4 out of 10, because this is absolutely ludicrous design decision. And how any game designer in their right mind would choose to do this is beyond me. I could see how somebody might say that about this, like constantly taking control away from you. They could have accomplished the exact same thing by having 30 to 60 second cutscenes or 60 second to 1 minute, 2 minute cutscenes every 7 or 8 or 10 minutes. Instead of like literally 30 seconds on, 60 seconds off, 30 seconds on, 60 seconds off. And frequently they'll take control of your avatar for 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. Like you'll be walking and then you'll open a door and then they take control for 5 seconds and then you get it back. Or it's very odd in that regard.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, it sounds frustrating. I mean, just listening to it sounds frustrating.
It's not frustrating me. There's so much going on atmospherically, and it's so good graphically, and the voice acting is so good. The characters are so interesting that the game is better than the sum of its parts. But I could 100% see someone put the disc in their I could see one person put it in and say this game is not that bad. It's super, got all these great things to it. And then I could hand it to you, and I could see you go home and be like infuriated to the point of throwing something against the wall.
What the fuck?
Right? Yeah, I absolutely could. It's a very interesting game. And so, but I feel like I need, there's so many of these hints at this point that I feel like I'm, an hour and a half in, I'm still getting tutorial type stuff, and so. I will wait to really give my full assessment until I can get some more time in the game this week.
Okay.
Yep.
Fair enough, I suppose. For my own part, I decided, I've been playing a little bit of mobile stuff. I've been playing Star Wars Commander on the iPad. I started a new game of FTL on the iPad. That kicks major ass, as you can well imagine.
Yep.
But the main thing I've been playing is Shadow of Mordor. Of course, I was talking last week about XCOM, and that I was starting a new game in XCOM Enemy Within, and I went to play it, and I sat down, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. I kept thinking, you've got Shadow of Mordor hanging over your head for months now. You really, really ought to finish that game before you start anything else. And so I decided to go back to it, and I couldn't exactly articulate why I was hesitant to do so, why I felt so, I don't know, just so kind of spent with that game. And, it's something that you and I had talked about, that kind of phenomena of it's not just how long the game lasts, but it's sort of how long your interest level in the game lasts.
Right.
And you hope that those two coincide relatively closely. You hope that if you're going to play a game that's going to require 30 hours of your time, you hope that it maintains your interest for the 30 hours. And I guess I kind of felt, because I was playing piecemeal and I was really getting kind of bogged down in just doing side quests and stuff with Shadow of Mordor, I kind of burned through 8-9 hours playing it and didn't really accomplish all that much in terms of advancing the story. And consequently, I kind of reached a point where it's like, well, I've invested the 8 or 9 hours of interest that I was going to have in this game. I just didn't do it finishing the game. And so maybe that's it. Maybe that's all that I'm going to have with it. But because frankly, I was getting bored with it. I was at a point where I kind of felt like it was just getting really repetitive and I wasn't really doing anything new. And I was starting to just not care all that much. So I thought, I'll go and I'll invest a couple of good solid hours in this and see if I can maybe push through this. And I'm really glad I did, because as it turns out, I was literally right at the beginning of this section of the game where the mechanics open up yet again.
The second section, like the second map area?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, correct.
Yeah. That's
where the mechanics open up again and you get to start doing some really cool stuff. Namely, you get to start building your own army.
Yes.
That's right, through the branding technique.
Which I love.
So it's completely changed the game. I mean, it's a completely different game now that I have that. And I'm glad that I didn't just let it sit for lack of interest, because it's gotten really interesting all over again. So I've completed the first kind of tutorial leg of that process, where it's like, okay, you can brand orcs at the individual level. You can help them along so that they can become captains, bodyguards of war chiefs, and then you can help them become actual war chiefs. And it's treading on a lot of familiar ground. You've gone through the process of hunting down and taking out commanders and captains and war chiefs, but now you're doing it in concert with your own kind of orc army of Uruks that you have that you've branded and basically forced to serve your cause. It's wicked cool. I mean, it's wicked cool. And knowing that this game won this game won like title of the year from GDC, it's really no surprise why. I mean, the innovation in gameplay mechanic that we've seen in Shadow of Mordor, the way that they have taken what could have been a very forgettable adventure title, but really turned it into, I think, a landmark kind of case study on just thinking outside the box a little bit and doing something really, really innovative. I totally get all the accolades and everything that this game has gotten. I have to say that even though I knew in concept that this was going to be coming and that you were going to be doing this, the experience of understanding that rationally and experiencing it viscerally and emotionally, they don't relate to one another at all. You can't really understand how cool that is until you do it. And now that I've done it, I get it, and I'm going to do more of it because I like it.
Brent essentially just lost his virginity.
Adam's team. Ow. Anyway, yeah.
How far into that second? Like, how many hours have you played since? Roughly, ballpark.
Probably 2. I literally just finished the first kind of leg where you help, whatever the guy's name is, you help move him from a small time commander to a captain to a bodyguard to a war chief himself. That first leg where they're basically kind of holding your hand and walking you through each part of it so you understand it. I've just finished that. So I now have one of the 5 war chiefs branded in my camp. I've now got to go after the other 4.
I had so much fun playing that game. I really, really did.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you went back and played more of it. Yeah, I mean, you still have more ahead of you. It's just it's such a good time. And I agree with you.
Can't wait.
It's so brilliant of them to say, okay, we're going to, like, I really felt like I was just beginning to kind of tire a little bit of the game.
Yeah.
When I was like, oh, wait, look, there's a whole new map. And all these new mechanics, and it reinvigorated it for me. It was really,
totally
my experience. It was really well done, and something that other game designers could look to when designing their game. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
I agree with you. I hope that they do. Think about, okay, as much as this game owes its combat to the Arkham Knight franchise, as an example, think about this mechanic folding its way back into the Arkham Knight franchise, where you've got a criminal underworld, kind of mechanic, where you've got like the major players that we all know and love, people like Joker, Two-Face, Penguin, etc., Batman's Rogues Gallery, but underneath them you have captains, you have bodyguards, you have street level guys, and some version of the Nemesis system works its way into a future Batman game. As opposed to branding guys, you turn them into informants for you. You get them working for you, delivering information about what other people are doing so that you can foil their plans. I mean, on and on. I mean, just think about how some of these mechanics could work their way back into the Arkham games, which has obviously been an influence here. The possibilities of this kind of thinking and game design going other places is really exciting.
It is extremely exciting, and I'll be curious. As a matter of fact, you and I will be talking a little bit about some Batman stuff next week on Outlaw Gamer Radio. But for this week, Brent, I think we're going to call it a show. And as always, indeed, we want to hear what our listeners think about everything we talked about. So please sound off, whether it's Shadow of Mordor, The Order 1886, Kojima leaving Konami, Nintendo's announcement of their next-generation hardware and software package, Gabe Newell talking about Valve's game development, Star Wars Battlefront, or God of War 3. We want to hear everything that you guys think about what we talked about and anything game-related. As usual, he is Brent Adams. I am Lauren Baumgarten. And remember, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing.